Perhaps it is because I grew up in the era I did, but something very strange has happened in the world of politics. The ancient Greeks called it politikos, which meant of, for, or relating to the citizens of a city or a community. The idea of politics was intended to be a way for the people of any place to come together and decide upon the best governance of that place. Aristotle said that a state is an association of similar persons whose aim is the best life possible. What is best is happiness, and to be happy is an active exercise of virtue and complete employment of it. The idea of governing was about the chance to debate and persuade. The Greeks believed that persuasion was the highest art form. Getting people to change their mind was a hallmark of great leadership, but also a good citizenry. No issue is static. There are not societal concerns whose solutions remain cast in stone. Philosophically, mankind is a messy endeavor, fallible from its inception, and bent towards the wrong. The Greeks understood that debate about the fluctuation of ideas was about addressing the fluidity of culture, but they made no illusion that their democratic decisions manifested perfection. They understood that because people were motivated by self-interest first, and predisposed to leverage that to the benefit of one over the other, that republicanism required debate and the changing of minds. They could hold conviction, but it had to be rooted in the noble endeavor of virtue and observation. When something changed or new data points were introduced, the Greeks understood that the discipline of dealing with that change was getting together and arguing about the best methods of addressing the solution. But our era has made politics as dogmatic as religious doctrine. Being a conservative or a liberal requires strict adherence to a set of ideas that are codified within the unwritten scriptures of media, personality, and party. None of that fervency was something the Greeks would have ever embraced. When the founders of our country formulated their best interpretation of what a republic might look like in a constitution, they gave strict warning about factionalism and party division. John Adams famously stated about the storm clouds on the horizon of the early United States that was moving towards a two-party world.
There is nothing I dread so much as a division of the republic into two great parties, each arranged under its leader and concerting measures in opposition to each other. This, in my humble apprehension, is to be dreaded as the greatest political evil under our Constitution.
George Washington had similar sentiments in his farewell address.
The alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissensions, which in different ages and countries has perpetrated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism.
The 21st century has not been kind to the heritage of politics. It has seemed to cast in permanence the idea that there is only one way to govern, one way to see issues, one way to deal with people who think differently. It is not a healthy way about living or thinking, and our country shows the results of this diet of saturated sectarianism. Our politicians have spoken louder, with more conviction than ever about their way of thinking. They battle about the 20% of the issues that no one has solvable answers to, and ignore the 80% that would make life better for every citizen. They crave their power and their fractionalization of politics, and the lack of debate that comes from absolute devotion to parroted positions has left us in a dried-out corn husk of what was once a great republic. One of the more interesting moments in America in 2024 is the emergence of the independent political voice. Robert Kennedy Jr., once a devotee to the party system, left the Democratic Party to run for president as a standalone voice. He has continuously been indefinable by manner of the traditional silo system. On many issues, he sounds far more conservative than his Republican challenger, and on others, he appeals more broadly to the traditional voice of the Democrats. He has become sand in the gearbox for the powerful. He is more honest about his ideas, and has more willingness to change his mind about issues that the average American faces than any other politician in my lifetime. He does the diligence required to analyze the actual problem, then formulates his ideas rather than stance upon the data collected. It is much more in line with the Greek ideal of the democratic process of politic. His selection of Nicole Shanahan as his vice presidential candidate sent waves of disarray through the traditional establishment and through supporters of his own campaign. She was an absolute unknown entity who for the Democratic Party was terrifying to them from their traditional pandering perspective. She was a woman of ethnicity from California who had moved away from their party towards Mr. Kennedy. She was also far too liberal for the conservative checkbox crowd who vote based upon their radio hero's indubitableness. Yet the hallmark of Mr. Kennedy's introductory speech of Miss Shanahan was that the person for whom he was searching was the person who was most able to change their thinking on their most long-held beliefs. If the Greeks still have any pull, that kind of politician should not be a revolutionary ideal in a republic. And yet, for those most invested in the benefit from the current dysfunction, Miss Shanahan is a threat that has to be characteristically and party ideologically destroyed. Nicole Shanahan is not about to be persuaded that the evidence of her life isn't real, something that party politics requires and demands. Instead, she has come to the honest conclusion that the world we live in is a media-made construct, designed to keep people focused on their differences instead of their commonality. A child changes everything. Damage to that child breeds indignation and a righteous indefatigableness. If something that is long-standing in a mind is able to be moved, not by whims or the persuasion of bought media, but by one's own understanding and diligence, then they are in line with the spirit of the Greeks and their understanding of political persuasion. The art is in the disclosure. Truth is the ideal that reveals to the mind what can become of a world if controlling it is not the goal, but instead an association of similar persons whose aim is the best life possible.